On this episode of ResiWeek, we talk Julie Jacobson CES highlights. Hey Google was everywhere at CES, and the 5G transition will be faster than the 4G. All this and more on this episode of ResiWeek.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is ResiWeek episode 102, Google's CES.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by Kramer, AV Beyond the Box, and by SDVOE, the platform for networked AV.
Welcome to ResiWeek. This is your weekly wrap-up of all the latest news and stories for the residential AV industry. I'm your host, Matt D. Scott for AVNation.tv. And today I'm pleased to be joined by the one and only Jason Knott. He is the editor of CE Pro. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here after a long week in Vegas. Last but not least, we have Joe Whitaker. He is the president and owner of the Thoughtful Home. How are you, sir?
Doing well. Glad to be on again.
I like the beard, man. It's a good look.
It's,
it's a little gray, but other than that, it's fantastic.
Well, yeah, I'm getting old.
Don't you hate that? My wife turns to me all the time and like, hey, by the way, I just found another one. Thank you. That's helpful. Let's talk about that. All right, gentlemen, let's get right in. This past week was the wrap up of CES, and Jason was there on the floor, as well as the whole crew from CE Pro, as well as pretty much every other journalist, media person, etc. This is Julie Jacobs' best of CES from 2018. It's a quick run through of essentially, I believe, the 7 best things she found, including the signal that translates American Sign Language, the frame, which is like an Amazon key for your car so that you have access to it, the life door, Watts battery, which is a modular energy brick, the Legrand and Avana, I believe I'm saying that right, which is a presence sensing network technology, the Vintel, which is a virtual window, and Garage Smart Labs, which is a garage thing. I'm not sure exactly what that one is, and the Swidget, which is adaptable outlets. Jason, I want to start with you on this one. One, how much ground does Julie have to cover to find all of these things out there? Because this is like, it's not like she went to the IoT pavilion space and found these 7 things. She's hitting stuff from all over the map, literally.
Yeah, and that's the show. I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head there with this is an IoT show. I mean, and think about, all the things that custom integrators have done for so long, and now they're right at the driver's seat of all this interconnectivity between everything that people do in their lives. Now, one thing on that piece from Julie, Matt, to note, that was her picks sight unseen. So those were her actually picks before she even went to the show.
Yeah.
Those are the 7 that she saw just from, she did a great preview webinar with Joe where they went through all the pavilions and talked about some of the things. So, but the exciting part about CES is, integrators are in the catbird seat with the Internet of Things, and it's only going to get better and bigger and more complicated and more widgety, and integrators can be the guys who connect it all together for customers.
See, and I think that's my biggest concern is the widgety factor of it. It goes so quickly beyond true integration and just kind of stays in that widgety space. Joe, when you look through this list of products, there's not necessarily a ton here that lends itself directly to integration and the CEDIA channel and the space that most of our listeners, most of our audience is in, beyond, maybe the Legrand thing for sure, and really the life door. What do CEDIA channel people take away from lists like this and really CES in general?
Well, the list is interesting, and it kind of goes along with what Jason was just saying. during that webinar, I labeled CES this year for IoT is IO too many, because that's it was really IoT based. However, I'll take that over 2010 when it was all about cell phone cases. So I mean, we have made a move in the right direction. But when people look at these lists, I don't think they're thinking ahead, a little bit further ahead, because you look at Watt's battery, with the modular energy bricks. If that does invade our space, that could be a more cost-effective solution than Rosewaters, which is in our space. You look at the virtual window, the Windshield, or whatever that thing was called. That's a TV that's a window, basically. So that I'm willing to bet is going to be in our space. I mean, that's could be one of those things. Think of a master bedroom where you put a TV on the wall, and now it's also a virtual window. So I mean, these devices are like in the early IoT stage before adoption, and that's really the thing. This widget convention, as CES was this year, are a lot of them are widgets, gadgets, cogs, and gears that can be adopted to our space. I mean, speaking of widget, the Swidget, the adaptable outlets, if someone good
It's kind of cool.
If somebody good acquires them, like some company that might own Z-Wave, Zigbee, and Bluetooth and everybody else, that could become, I mean, seriously, because there's CO2 detector modules, LED lights, motion sensors, white noise speakers. I mean, you take that and you adopt it into a very, very big company. Done. It's an immediate win in our space. And there is one more that I thought needs to be in our space, but for other reasons. One of Julie's favorites in the entire thing, besides Swidget. Swidget was her pick for the winner for her, but she also had the thing for Life Door. Opens and closes doors depending on whatever in fire. But you think about that in an automation system, and if it was truly integrated, you get a whole bunch of extra things, as in front doors, back doors, automatically closing and then locking. That could be a very integratable device. So, I mean, in this list, you look at them, you're like, there's a one piece does one thing and only operates with one app piece of gear. But you let them go into year 2 and 3 when they start seeing our space, almost all of these could actually be worth something, with the exception of the license plate thing, although I do want one.
And to Joe's point, Matt, I read I think it was a New York Times overview, and they said that the show was dominated by startups. That the startups were really where the buzz was coming from, not from the big companies. And we all know that most of those guys are not going to make it. But to Joe's point, the best ideas will make it. They'll get bought by somebody and adopted by somebody. So that's the way you have to look at it from an idea standpoint.
I agree with Jason. This year is like the perfect big eye-opener. About a decade ago, a senior staff person at Sony told me, there's no money in ideas. All the money is us doing what we usually do and just improving on those things. This year was a perfect show of, it is the ideas of the future that are going to make money. Those big manufacturers that got no one in their booth because they're sticking to the status quo, just improving on what they've got. Look at where the booth traffic and the press was this year. It was in the idea factory. That is what I think the win for CES this year was.
Well, isn't that what you want, though, from a show like CES? You don't want Samsung to come out and show the wall. As cool as it was, that's not applicable for most people. You want that company that's going to come up and say, hey, check out this little thing I did. It's really cool. And then everyone can buy one.
Exactly.
Jason, I also wanted to touch on just kind of from our CES discussion. I saw a post that you had written on, I believe it was Facebook, about the lack of high-end audio available on the Venetian floors, and something to the effect that there used to be like three levels of that. And this year there was only one. There was a lot of manufacturers who either weren't there or kind of discreetly said this is probably going to be their last year there. Can you give us a quick overview of that?
Yeah, to your point, there was, always has been a very bustling activity in the Venetian suites with 3 different floors of high performance audio. And I guess maybe last year should have been an indicator when One of the booths was ARP, the Retired Persons Association, and one of the other booths was Serta mattresses. And everybody was kind of joking. And now this year it was one floor only, and kind of unsolicited, when I was going up and down or going along through the aisles there, through the different suites, all the vendors were venting to me that this is going to be it for them. Just the lack of traffic for various reasons. International traffic is not coming. Integrators aren't coming because of the expense of the show. They've decided to segregate high performance audio into its own little area, which makes it even more striking when there aren't as many people there. And then I got, personal emails from people after that post from vendors who were there who said, yeah, you're right. We're not coming back. So I don't have an answer for what CTA does in regards to bringing high performance audio into the fold, where you walk, it was elbow to elbow in the Las Vegas Convention Center and the Sands Expo. You could not move around. There were so many people there. And it was just a striking opposite to see so few people in the high performance audio area.
So Joe, when you look at that, how concerning is it that that high performance area may slowly continue to dwindle and effectively disappear from the CES crowd? Because let's face it, as much as we'd like to think that all the major news organizations and media organizations show up to CEDIA, they don't. They might send one or two people. They go to CES. And how do you get that in front of the mass market if it's not at CES?
Well, through the webinar, I tried to push people towards the high-res pavilion, which there were some good brands in there. There were some notable brands. But it's a trend thing. And here's the problem with it. Jason's saying they kind of spread everything out. I mean, that's exactly right. They're trying to toy with something is what they were doing, because on that side, anything to do with microphones, audio, anything else, I mean, the hot topic and the press topic was Google, with the Google Assistant. I mean, they had stuff everywhere. So that one kind of overtook it and overshadowed it. And, the other thing is, if you actually looked at the list of any kind of innovation or anything new or anything really cool in HRA this year, there wasn't a lot. I mean, there were, the same old same. New amps, new DSP, new speakers, some new headphones. A really cool little headphone DSP, but still, it was the same old, same old, same old. There wasn't a lot of innovation. And the list for the high-res audio pavilion, which I think that was in the Venetian. I think it was.
Yeah.
The list was great manufacturers, but there was nothing compelling. And that's a problem. So, when they organize these things, I don't know if there was something compelling and they're saving it for another show, like the one they do in Colorado. I don't know. I think for the CES crowd, high-res is not where you're not going to want to go to CES to see that anymore.
I see. All right, very good. Let's move on and kind of take your lead in there to a story that comes to us from Residential Systems and John Siaka, who was also at the show, entitled, "Hey Google, welcome to CES 2018. Don't mind the rain," which is my little add-on to that. Essentially, as Joe's smiling, this is an overview from John about the expansiveness and the omnipresence that Google seemed to have at the show this year, with everything from their little "Hey Google" GIF pinball machine thing to all their personnel running around in the white-clad jumpsuits with Google Assistant on them. Joe, I'll start with you on this. Reading this article and everything I saw leads me to think that obviously Google made a huge splash, but they literally eclipsed Alexa at this show specifically, showing integrations with countless companies, everyone from Z-Wave Alliance, which was announced at this show, to all these other little companies, to Fabaro, who now works with all three of those smart home assistants. Is this the turning point for Google in this space?
No. I mean, this is an atypical move for a show like this. before the show even launched, I knew that either Apple or Google was going to do this, because the last two big shows we had, Amazon owned the show.
Mm-hmm.
They did with what they integrated. But there kind of also comes to the point of who is this market for? So when you look at the positioning, you go to CES, it's, specifically mostly consumer stuff. So it's like, okay, Google said, we didn't put a lot of it in on the Cedia side. Maybe we're not going to be that integrator friendly. We're going to be extremely consumer facing so that we can at least catch up steam and get some more of these little boxes in more people's homes and grab a foothold. Now, while some of the announcements were cool announcements, I don't know who's going to buy a $1,200 a pair set of speakers, wireless speakers. I mean, that it's essentially it's a smaller Sonos speaker. I don't know. I mean, their tagline should be half the size, 4 times the cost. You look at some of these are intriguing. I mean, the which one was it? There was one of them on here, actually, the Brinks thing. That I think was kind of cool. But then again, once again, you're going to the consumer market, which is why if you're Google, yes, you want to make a big splash in the consumer side so that you can get a bigger footprint and then start coming after us guys. But one of the coolest part of this, what I thought they did, was in their advertising for Fabaro, where you had on their signage, all their signage, it was Sonos, Yamaha, Bose, Russ Sound, Lutron, Yale, and then August and even DSC. And then you have a really high-end camera like Mobotics. So, I mean, some of their partnerships look good to me, but once again, they're not coming after my market. They're coming after the consumers.
So, Jason, if we look at kind of that one thing that Joe said that really caught me was consumer versus integration. So when we look at the splash that Google made, when we look at the lack of awareness that they had at Cedia this past year, what works better for them? Does it make more sense for them to go after that DIY home market to be truly recognized as a leader in this? Or is it to go after the true integration channel?
Well, first of all, I think they were smart in that a lot of their presence. Now, granted, you got on the monorail and the monorail was playing Google ads. It was Ask Google, hey Google, and the audio ads, and they were all over billboards, all over the sides of the monorail. But I think the strategic thing that I think that they did was that Google had a heavy presence in the smart home area, which was the Sands Expo portion of the show. So a lot of the stuff that John has in the blog, almost all of it was not at LVCC, the central hall, but was over in the smart home area, where if you're an integrator, you were spending more of your time in that smart home side. So, to Joe's point, there's probably a consumer play there, but I think they were strategically undercutting Amazon in the professional market by doing the heavy focus on the in the Sands Expo area, which is where the Tech Home group, the Tech Home Pavilion was, the Tech Home division of CETA was, where Amazon, did have a presence over in the LVCC. Amazon was over there with all the big boys and the display guys, but if you were primarily concentrated on the Sands Expo side, you were going to get an overload of Google. So I just think it was a smart branding play, and it worked. Somebody like John, just like me, spent most of their time not with over in the central hall or where the autonomous vehicles were and all that kind of stuff. We were over in the smart home area.
So does this, because they made such a big play and they're going so heavily after the DIY market, at what point are we going to see more manufacturers jump on board and truly support all three players? And just one sec, Joe. Obviously, Apple has not yet made a heavy bet into this yet. They still haven't released the HomePod. it's still not there. But we have to know that Surrey will come at some point with some form of strength.
Well, you've got a VHS Betamax war going on right now between Google and Amazon. And I think Apple's actually doing a smart thing. I think they are holding back. They're waiting to see who gets the best capture market, and then they're going to emulate. The problem with our market and the custom market is I don't think that Google's ever going to truly capture our market until they come up with a device with an audio output. Because, it's funny, and I've said this before, and I'll say it a million times. Integrators like speakers and integrators like beer, but integrators don't like speakers inside beer cans. And that's essentially what they're forcing us to stick with. Give us an audio output and it'll get it'll get embraced a little more. But I think Apple's just waiting. Apple's just going to see who's going to capture the most market share, and then we are going to emulate them and crush the third guy.
Because I must say, I every bit of news that trickled out or tsunamied out of CES, I kept waiting to see little snippets of, ooh, this is HomeKit enabled. Ooh, this is HomeKit enabled. Just because we have some clients that, for whatever reason, are enamored with this concept of HomeKit. But I keep looking at all three players and going, at some point, someone's going to have to take the lead, because there's too many options out there. And we didn't even get into Bixby. Was that at all prevalent, Jason?
In terms of Bixby?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you grew up in the Amazon jungle, which you might have, Matt, I don't know, but if you had, and you were transported and beamed into the central hall of LVCC, and you had never heard of Samsung, never heard of LG, never heard of Haier, never heard of TCL, never heard of Sony, you would have thought they were home automation companies, not video companies. That's
right.
How prevalent it was there. Every one of those booths had glass enclosures with voice communication going on, conscious home, the conscious laundry, the conscious bathroom. I mean, they had some real crazy stuff, but it was all about smart home, even at the big manufacturer level.
Very good. Very good. All right, gentlemen, the last story of the day, and this comes to us from Twice Magazine, and it's from the CES keynote. This is kind of our CES wrap-up show. The 5G transition will create a massive IoT platform. This was the Qualcomm president, Chris. I'm not even going to attempt that at the CES keynote. Essentially, what he was saying was that the transition to 5G is going to be significantly faster than the 4G transition from traditional 3G that was out there. And part of what is going to drive this is that the rollout for 5G phones is going to be so much faster because of the 30 times improvement in latency, which lets phone makers keep their price of phones down by offloading memories or offloading the memory within the phone to the cloud, because it's so much faster that way. Jason, we've already seen a huge transition to cloud-based everything. Every single, Google Pixel commercial touts that you'll never, fill up your phone with photos because they all get saved to the cloud. Apple's been driving for iCloud syncing for, 2 years now. Is that what's going to drive this? Because to me, making the phones is the easy part. Deploying the network is the hard part. And, obviously this did not give the full speech from him, the full layout. But I think it's a lot more than just, oh yeah, the phone manufacturers can make these phones faster.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I would pull out of this piece there was a quote in there where they said that 5G will, quote unquote, transform industries. So here's the potential that it has for transforming the custom installation business, that you would be able to stream content directly to an individual device within the ecosystem of a home. So in other words, you don't have, if you're going to stream to Netflix, I'm just making that up, but you could, instead of streaming through the home network through your receiver, through your Blu-ray player, whatever it might be, through your smart TV, they will stream directly to the device itself. So 5G has the opportunity of completely creating an upheaval within how integrators build and design networks. And in fact, you could make the argument that if 5G comes to its fruition, as they're saying, that the cell phone signal booster will be more important than the network router in a home, because you will be totally dependent on the speed at which you're able to stream content through the cellular network to an individual device. Not just the mobile phone, but we're talking the devices in the theater.
Interesting. Joe, given that conversation, and you and I've had many conversations about networks in homes and how that is such a backbone. When we think back to, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, when you got your first 3G phone and you realized that a lot of times your 3G connection was faster than your home Wi-Fi just because you didn't necessarily need it. If what Jason, is alluding to happens and occurs, what does that do to the integrator who, let's be honest, as a whole, integrators have had in the past a bit of a problem becoming network professionals, right? A lot of them are still kind of making it up as they go. What's going to happen when it becomes, not only do they have to know their network, but they need to know cell phone boosters and cell networks?
I don't think they're going to use, I don't think cell phone boosting per se is going to be a thing. I think there's going to be an overall upheaval. And the overall upheaval is going to have a lot to do with service provision, period. I look at this and I think of the way over the air works right now and all those boxes that are out there that you can use, whether it be the big ones like TiVo, small ones like Tableau, those kind of DVRs, so to speak, to use over the air. I see a combination happening probably in the next 2 to 3 years. When on the side of your house, you're going to have an over the air antenna and a 5G antenna. And the 5G is going to bring in your data. The over the air is going to bring in your standardized local content. And those two are going to get married together. And that, so like satellite dishes are gone and your standardized, telco or internet service provision is going to be gone. We're going to see combination boxes. I think that's where the biggest effect is going to be, because you're not going to want to do cell phone boosters inside the house. You're going to want to use a 5G antenna array on the outside of the house and then use Wi-Fi calling on the inside. That's the kind of hybrid we're going to be up against. But the thing is, being able to provide those type of 5G speeds to multiple users within a household. So now it's really going to be about that internal network, the speed that can be done with that, the bandwidth, because you really look at the specs of 5G, 2 years, two things are going to happen. 5G paired with ASTC 3.0.
3.0, yep.
You take those two things together, and our landscape changes on the way that we are provided services, whether it be data, phone, or television, or media, or content. Put those two things together, and there will be a drastic change.
Very good. All right, gentlemen, that's all the time we have for this episode. Thanks so much for joining us. Jason, if people want to connect with you and follow up on all of the CE Pro coverage from CES, where can they do that?
They can go to cepro.com, of course, and they can also follow me on Twitter at JasonW.
Very good. Thanks again. Joe Goodbud, where can people connect with you?
Everyone can always shoot me an email, joe@thethoughtfulhome.com. You can find me on social media anywhere by using just The Thoughtful Home. And, of course, you can find me at Cedia.
Very good. Thank you so much. For myself, if you'd like to connect with me, you can find me on Twitter at Matt D. Scott and every other social platform. But more importantly, please stop by AVNation.tv. You'll find this show as well as a wide variety of our other shows with all of the verticals that we cover. When you visit the site, please take a moment to check out our underwriters. We are extremely thankful for their support and ask that you support them as well. Thanks again. That's all the time we have for this episode of ResiWeek.